Yo, my man Andres Ayesta is in the motherfucking building. What is good, dude?
What's going on, man? I'm pretty happy to be here, dude. I like what you're doing with this new Can't Believe I Made It podcast, man. Very excited for this when I saw it, and I love the artwork too.
Oh, the artwork is fire, dude. I actually had a friend who used her name's Tara Funk. Shout out to you, Tara, when you listen to this. But I had a friend who used her before, so she had threw up a couple mock-ups, man, and this is one of the ones that just really spoke to me. And I sent it out to all the family and friends, and everyone loved this one, man. So like I said, I said this off air to you, but this is super serendipitous to have you on, man. I think what started my journey was you inviting me onto your podcast when I was rocking like the dad nutritionist vibe. So to have you on, man, really means a lot, dude. So welcome to the pod, brother.
Yeah, man. I'm excited to be here. You've
Yeah.
been on my podcast a million times, so like I think it was time. It's a time I'll actually kind of return the favor.
Yeah. Yeah, I get to make the rules now, man. I'm running this shit, okay?
Yeah,
Not
you're running
you.
the show now.
It's usually you. Um, but man, so I for our listeners out there, obviously you kind of got a little intro on who Andres is. Andres, one of the coolest things about your process is not only just being, getting to be one of your really good friends and having a front row seat to your success and where you've come from. I also get to see like the vulnerable parts of you that are really cool. And I figured we would kind of start like the wedding, right? So I was a late entry. I think I decided to come like
It took
3 days.
some
Yeah.
convincing to get you to be there.
Yeah. Yes. I was so our listeners out there, my guy Andres here married his beautiful, beautiful best friend and wife, GB, at the beginning of May. And so 3 days before, I decided, like, all right, I got to make this happen. This means a lot to me to be able to see them go through this life moment. And so I wanted to be there. So I figured we would start at the wedding, man. Um, having like 2 months removed from the wedding itself. What were some of the biggest moments for you? Like some of those like life moments for you that you really just were like, damn, that was dope.
From the wedding specifically.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I think it was something I never actually celebrated anything big in my life. So I didn't really have like a big kind of birthday party ever or like a big
hmm
graduation or anything like that. So for me, my wedding had to be that day.
yeah,
And it didn't happen because we were supposed to get married May 1st of 2020, but pandemic hit,
yeah,
and we were forced to kind of like change some things around. Um, so obviously that was a big thing for us. And it happened, and it was like everything that I've really envisioned it to be. It kind of went by too fast.
yeah,
But it was that moment for me, and for me to be able to kind of share that with friends and family. And just kind of like share that important day of my life with my,
yeah.
like you said, my best friend and my partner in crime and my partner in life, GB. So that was why it was such a big something that I really didn't want to, like, because we had the choice to just say, like, let's just call it off, let's just kind of do something small and whatever. And
Yeah,
it's like I chose not to. This was
yeah,
so important to me, no matter how much it costed, no matter how much or how it was going to be, and it was worth it. Every penny that
yeah.
we spent, every time that we spent doing it, it was I can't, I can't take it back. It's incredible,
Yeah.
the experience that we had.
Man, and it was a huge blessing to be there too. I remember, and I really relate to you as well. When Callie and myself got married, like we had a handful of people that we skillfully and methodically selected because we wanted them to be part of that day. And I said this to you, like for me to be invited, man, that really meant a lot because it was probably the same thing for you to skillfully and methodically select people that you wanted to share that moment with. And so I'm kind of thinking back on the night, and I've always been a sucker for like groomsmen speeches, right? Or just like best man, and then obviously maid of honor speeches, because that's where the person gets to be extremely vulnerable with what they've gone through with the person, how they know the person. And so, Coach Smish, man, shout out to you if you ever hear this. But your best man was one of your earliest friends when you got to the U.S., correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Well, not
Okay.
earliest. I would say probably like after I started my actual career, not in school,
Uh huh.
but it was more like when I actually started being and practicing as a dietitian.
Yeah. So like that, you guys share a special friendship, and so he, for our listeners out there, he had this really heartfelt speech, and one of the things that really spoke to me that I was like, shit, man, I don't really think I fully understand what this story is. Um, he said he saw you working out, and he had this moment where he was like, I got to know that man's story, and that's the thing. I remember sitting there like that hit me too because I was like, I know your story from the time that we met and beyond, right? And there's just so many chapters and things in there that I've seen. Like I've seen like both of us be together, very vulnerable in the same room. We're doing the same process, and having different outcomes. And I was like, man, he said that, and I was like, damn, I need to hear his story. And then fast forward 2 months now, I get this opportunity, man. So I kind of just want to go on the heels of Coach Smith. Is like, all right, dude, what is your story? So let's
Yeah.
start there, man.
So yeah, that's literally exactly what he said, and I don't remember exactly what my response was then, but it was probably something along the lines as my typical intro went something along the lines of like, "Hey, I'm from Venezuela. I
Hmm.
came here in 2009, and just to become a dietitian. I wanted to, my dream was obviously to work with professional athletes, so here I am. But obviously, the more like detail kind of story traces back to my home, which is Venezuela. I grew up, I was born and raised in Venezuela, and I was born in Caracas, and I was raised in kind of like the east coast of the country. Um, and growing up, I was the kind of kid that had pretty much everything. Big house. We had, I remember at the time, up until I was 8 years old, we had two Mercedes Benz. We had a boat. We had a
Damn.
motorcycle. We had like a really beautiful, kind of like nice house in a really nice neighborhood. So that changed like 180 because we pretty much like lost a lot of that
Mhm.
and that was a very time that I wasn't really sure what was happening. So when I was 8 years old, we ended up moving from Caracas, which is like kind of like the capital, kind of like the suburbia area. So we live in the suburbs and those
Mhm.
kind of like cool spots. I was attending a Catholic school and like private and everything. So we ended up moving to the East Coast to a farm. And I was like, I wasn't really kind of piecing things together at the time, but I remember my dad trying to learn a lot about agriculture and growing crops and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
he was always kind of an entrepreneur, like marketing kind of like person. So it didn't really register really what was going on then.
Yeah.
So I moved and it really kind of took me a few to realize that we were actually not in a really good financial position then. And that was
Mhm.
just an opportunity for us to do something different. And that's kind of where everything sort of like kind of like flipped over a little bit.
Yeah.
And just fast track a little bit, we went through really rough times. We there was a times we were never homeless, but there was a time where we really couldn't afford a place to live, so we moved with my aunt at the time.
Mhm.
And I think we lived there for like a year. My dad wasn't working. He bought a farm that was very unsuccessful.
Yeah.
And we were really struggling. I think later, a few years, probably was like when I was like around 16 or 17 years old, I found like a notepad from my dad where he would write things such as, God, please help me. I want
Mhm.
to provide for my kids, like, give me like some answers, kind of like freak out moments, for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that kind of touched me. And of course, I grew up also, the key thing about it is like my family's always been like, they literally sweat, blood, tears, and everything. So we could have, me and my brother, we could have everything that we needed. So we still
Yeah.
went to a private school. We still like, had clothes, we had everything. So they sacrificed so much so we could have those things. But obviously that
Mhm.
also took a toll for me because I grew up in a place where there was a lot of people with a lot, and not like we had a whole lot either, right? So we were kind
Yeah.
of like, that obviously there were people like that too, but it was just, I felt that, right? It was like seeing my friends having cars, and like they had like boats and all these different things that at some point in my
Yeah.
life I'd had and I didn't anymore. So it was kind of difficult for me, and ever since then I kind of had that want, that need to just want to, not necessarily to have those things, but to have the freedom to have them.
Mhm.
Um and I remember obviously that was kind of tough for me to be able to see those things, but I really buried myself in the books. I was still kind of like the kid that was social and enjoyed playing
Yeah.
sports. I did all kinds of different things, but I decided to say I'm gonna like study hard so I can have a good degree, so I can have a lot of money, right? So I can have a
Hmm.
good job and all these different things like that. Um, so that's kind of where like the whole story started, man. And I at some point I was an A student, got all the grades, got everything, and when I was going to school in Caracas, still some of the same things, same kind of environment, same people. I didn't have a car until I was like 21 years old.
Yeah.
I didn't even have a car when I was in Venezuela because we couldn't really afford one.
Hmm.
So it was just like really kind of pushing myself to be the best that I could be until I saw an opportunity. I was an exchange student here in the US in Indiana when I was like probably in 2006 after I graduated high school.
Hmm.
And I never saw as an opportunity to stay because I didn't really like it too much. Because, well, what you're gonna like
I
about
mean,
obviously hillbilly
yeah.
town, and
Yeah.
like yeah, I was like the only like quote unquote Mexican, even though I wasn't Mexican, that was there. So it was I went back and obviously that's when I started school and I there was something that was just not clicking. But there was a very turning point in my life when like this is where I made like this like drastic massive decision to change and to do something different because I was obviously kind of living the college life but a little bit
Hmm.
too much. I was a kind of kid that was like drinking pretty much every night of the week. I was
Yeah.
like I was still going to school. The thing about me is like I would be partying, I would do all different things like that, but I would still show up for
You
my
still
school
got
and
your
I was
stuff
still
done.
I got
Yeah.
my stuff done. But
Yeah.
obviously get to a point where like sometimes even my parents were worried about it. Um, because when I was 13, in order for us to be able to have the things that we had at some point, my dad had to make a really tough decision to leave, not leave us, but to leave our house to go and work in a different place. And ever
Yeah.
since I was 13, we never been a family that's been in the same household up until I left, right? So like that was obviously another big kind of turning point in my life.
Hmm.
So, I, because of that same reason, like a lot of times, like we kind of have some of like the issues in terms of family and different things and the different areas. But I found myself a lot in alcohol and all those different kinds of things, not necessarily as a problem, but like I just wanted to have fun, right? I didn't really
Yeah.
make much
Yeah.
money, didn't really kind of give a shit about anything else. I just needed to go to school, get the grades, and then just have
Yeah.
fun, right? So it was not until I think it was 2008. I think remember it was June 24th. Hanging out with my friends. My mom was using my mom's car. I think it's probably like a Friday or Saturday night. Went out, drank too much, drove, drunk, and then I actually had a really bad car accident. And I fled the scene, being in my state of drunkenness that I don't even remember what was kind of going through my head as it
Yeah.
nothing happened. And the worst part is like I didn't even go back to go home because I was scared. I actually went back to go party.
Yeah.
And that was like a big like holy shit, what the hell am I doing?
That's a moment
And
right there. Yeah.
yeah, and I actually got chased by an actual like off-duty cop at the time, like, and he just saw everything that happened, so he stopped me. He was just so mad. And he's just like, "Follow me. You're gonna go back to the scene." And the first thing that happened, then I got out of the car, and then there was like 3 or 4 people in the car. The car was just like total, like I couldn't really do anything. Hopefully, thankfully, everybody was fine. But like
Yeah.
this girl just looked at me and just like slapped me like real hard.
Hmm.
And it's like, how dare you? Like, how could you do this to us? Yada yada yada. So it was a tough moment, and obviously Venezuela is the kind of country where you can kind of get away with shit. So
Yeah. Yeah.
just had to pay things off and whatever. And like, I mean, that's the kind of things in here would have happened, and I probably would have seen some days in jail, or like it would have been license removal or whatever. Like, of course, it
Yeah.
wasn't the case, but it wasn't really that the issue or like the thing of me kind of getting rid of that. It was just the fact that it just changed me, and I said I
Yeah.
can't keep doing this. So I decided to apply for scholarships. I already applied for scholarships, but I turned them down to come here to the U.S.
Hmm.
Um, I turned them down because I realized that I didn't think it was possible for me to do it because of money.
Yeah.
But I just that weekend I literally just said like I'm done with this, and I
Yeah.
contacted the scholarship coordinator, and she literally just said you're still on time, but you have to hurry up. So from June 24th up until August 24th, so 2 months, I accepted to go to the University of Southern Indiana and in Indiana. I had to move different cities so I can go back home, remove all my stuff, get my visa
Hmm.
situated, get my passport. All these different things happened in a period of 2 months, which some people say like it's impossible to wait. Like I don't know how you did it in 2 months.
Yeah,
All I
yeah.
know is that ever since I made that decision, everything just kind of like picked up momentum, and everything just
Hmm.
lined up for me to for that to be exactly what needed to happen. And on August 22nd, I think it's really when I arrived here in the U.S. in 2009,
Hmm.
and here's where I've been ever since. Like, well, obviously,
Yeah.
like, fast track the story, went to school, like, all these different things like that, and I actually wound up here in Tampa, Florida now, where now I own my business. 10, 12 years
Yeah.
later, now ever since like that happened. So that's probably like the shortest version that I could really give.
No, I'm gonna make you dive into a little bit more because I think you mentioned a couple life moments in there that I kind of want to dig into a little bit, Andres. So, I mean, you talk about having a lot of things and having a lot of privilege at the age of 8, and then moving and not really understanding why. And I would like to sort of dig into that a little bit. So, did that have anything to do with what was going on with the political situation in Venezuela?
No, back then it was still
Okay.
things were still fine. It was just a situation where like you know this the where my dad was working at the time stopped really not
Hmm.
working out, and obviously like
Yeah.
things were not going in the direction that they were supposed to go to. I think obviously
Hmm.
we actually had a store then, um like a place where they sell like comforters and stuff like that, and like just
Yeah.
kind of like a towel. I mean, just kind of like stuff like that. So anyways, um, that was just obviously not cutting it for us and our lifestyle. So that's obviously when
Yeah.
my dad has to start to, you know,
Yeah.
giving away things. And it was like, okay, like yeah, just take the boat as our payments and all those different things like that. So that's kind of where we had to make some rash choices, but it wasn't really necessarily political, economical. Yeah, sure, like
Hmm.
that's probably what it all started, but that was
Yeah.
back in like probably like '96. That was
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
Chavez eras and stuff like that, so not necessarily related to that.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, you talk about this other life moment too, obviously, with what happened with the crash and everything. So, I mean, you completely transform your life in 2 months. What were some of the messages or some of the people that got you through that 2 months? Where, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I've had my own issues with going out of the country. So to be able to do what you did is super impressive. So, are there people or moments in your life during those 2 months that you were like, this has to change?
No, it was just me. Honestly, I think it
Hmm.
was at a time where like I just had to make. At the time, I was dating somebody that was here actually, so that was obviously there was a bit of an incentive for me to come back.
Yeah.
And we had a long distance relationship and all that. So like that was the first person I ever shared that with, and I was like, hey, like I need to make something different, and
Hmm.
obviously she was happy and all that, and she's like supportive. But honestly, I think it was just me making a decision. In fact, I didn't tell my parents for like until I had everything situated. So I was
So
like
you're about to
probably
like leave.
yeah, it probably took a couple weeks,
Yeah.
once I kinda contacted people that I needed to contact and, like, making sure that this was happening, and it was not until, like, I was like, "Hey, I'm leaving, and, I this is how we're gonna be able to make it work," because they were still my parents
Hmm.
were still supporting me, and one thing about them is, like, they've always supported every decision I've ever made in my life.
Yeah.
So, they thought about it, they're like, "No, we'll make it work," and my dad has always had a saying, since we were little, and still does to the same day, which is, like, God would always provide, and,
Hmm.
like, he lives by that, like, every time, like, things become difficult or tough or, like, we're filled with uncertainty, he always says that, and I was like and he
Hmm.
said that, it's like, "God will provide, so
Yeah.
let's just jump and let's just take that risk."
Yeah.
So we did, and it was obviously the best decision I could have made.
Yeah. You know, you and I have joked, obviously, in our friendship about where you landed in the US. I would not have chose the Midwest. That's just me.
I didn't choose it, it chose me.
It chose you. So getting there, I mean, we've had some funny stories about like you being at Applebee's and whatnot too, man. So let's go back into that time in your life. What were some influential moments during that time? Because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here. I mean, how was your English at that time?
It was good. It was because I was already being an exchange student, so like
Okay.
language has never been, even when I came here, language has never been a barrier. I mean, I had a pretty strong accent in 2006 when I moved here,
Yeah.
um, but obviously that got solved after I was dating somebody for so long and all that. So by the time I came here, it was just yeah, it was English was never an issue.
hmm So if we're kind of thinking about that time, let's kind of fast forward to getting you to Florida. I really always loved the story of you and GB. So yeah, man, let's kind of dive into that a little bit. When did you meet GB and tell us about what was going on?
So that was actually not until a little bit like after. There's a lot of things that kind of happened in between. So
Hmm
I went to school in Indiana, and still obviously like this is obviously the first time I had my first car, the first time I rented my
Yeah.
own like kind of like apartment, all these different things. So it was like all these new things to me, which you never thought it was like possible. And that's obviously the kind of things the US kind of gives you compared to a third world country. The
Yeah.
opportunity to have those things by working on an Applebee's and like being a server in a restaurant. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's obviously some of the things that that really kind of helped me do those things. But I was still kind of like being trying to be that A student because of the fact that
hmm
they told me like in order for you to be able to kind of get this scholarship, that whatever, not scholarship, but internship that you want in dietetics, you have to get that internship. You have
hmm
to really show up for, you had to show off, like you had to really show really good grades, all different things like
You have to
that.
be
So whenever they,
competitive. Yeah.
yeah, so when they said that, I was like, "Shit, okay, well, like, I guess I gotta grind." So I did everything I needed to do. I
hmm
shadowed, I worked in places, I volunteered in places. I was the president of the food and student organization. I was, doing this and volunteering and all those different things like that. I checked all the boxes that I needed to check in order for me to make myself competitive, and I ended up getting the internship that I wanted and the most
hmm
competitive internship, one of the most competitive internships in the country, because it's like such a fast paced one in Houston. So I
Yeah.
that's another time, a moment where I realized, like, you know what? I'm just gonna pick up and go. So the one thing
Yeah.
in all this time is I was not afraid. I was like, like fearless. I was like, I need to go pick up and move to Houston. Okay, let's go. I
Yeah.
need to do this. Up, let's go. In fact, I completed my internship in Houston, and I got a job in Galveston, which is like the coastal area south of Houston. It's like an hour away in a
Yeah.
clinical position, and I wasn't sold on it, and I still had not taken my RT exam, and I started sending I mean, I was like, again, fearless. I was sending resumes to people. I was like, hey, like I reach out to like bunch of different random people, and one person I reached out to, her name is Stephanie Wilson, and she at the time was the director of IMG Academy, which is like massive sports academy for nutrition, well, just in general for
Huge.
sports, and uh, and I just sent her my resume, and she reached out to me, and it's like, hey, we're looking for somebody, like I like this and this and that, and I interviewed. I actually got the position, but she said you're gonna have to be here in a week, and I'm like, okay.
Damn.
I was like, okay, and it's like, and also there's also a caveat: if you don't have your RD by the time that you move, your pay is probably gonna be half of that. Will still be able to kind of hire you, but you're gonna have to
Yep.
like the
Yep.
pay will be kind of cut in half. And I was like, fuck that. I am taking
Yeah.
this exam. So I
I'm gonna
decided
figure
to
this out.
I
Yeah.
moved my test date. I had not even set it. I think I remember at the time, and I moved my test date like a week after, and I would have been studying for a month. I was like, like let it be whatever
Let's
it
figure it
is.
out.
And I think I took the test on a Tuesday. I got the same day results. They told me like, yeah, you passed. Like you're a dietitian. I was like, fuck yeah. So like next thing, I
Yeah.
literally had to go and come home and then hire a U-Haul and or something. I don't remember exactly what is it that I did to just move everything out of our apartment to just bring it into a storage. I was dating another person at a time, so that was again another thing that was just like, this is exactly what's gonna happen. So 2 days, 3 days later, I ended up like moving to Florida, which is exactly how I ended up here, and that's where I met Matt.
Yeah.
But that was obviously the kind of like the biggest kind of whirlwind. Now the story with GB didn't really kind of happen up until like maybe 2 to 3 years after, when I was in Orlando.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like cheesy story. We were trained at the same gym, and something just kind of caught my eye on her, and like we started conversations, and one thing led to the other, started dating, and here we are, married 6 years later.
Van, and so for our listeners out there too, getting to be both of their friends, to see the way that they connect and to see the way that they have built their dream business and their dream work lives is so it's so cool to see. Andres, you mentioned something in there that I want to dive into a whole lot more. You mentioned fearless. I just had to be fearless. So obviously, this podcast is about expanding and getting into the psyche of high performers, just like yourself. Um, what does it mean to be fearless for you, and where does that come from? Because that's not something that everyone has, dude. And I think that you and I both can acknowledge that being in the business that we are, knowing the people that we do, not everyone has that. So what does that mean for you, and where does it come from?
I recently was talking to one of my mentors on sales. His name is Will Hinkson. Shout out to you, dude. And he told me that one of the things, and this is something I've known, I just didn't really kind of connect to exactly what that means of how I operated. Uh,
Hmm.
but there's like two kinds of people in this world. That there's the people that are courageous, and there's people that are like, that kind of choose to be more, and not necessarily in a demeaning way, but cowards, right? The cowards are the kind of people, or the cowardice, like kind of like my mindset is like the type of mindset
Hmm.
in which you know that there's a decision that you need to be made to be better at something, to improve, to just go to the next level, and you know it's the right choice, but because of the fact that it kind of falls outside of your comfort zone, and that's obviously that at the edge of your comfort seat, right?
Hmm.
You choose to simply step back and retreat, and you say like, it's not the right time.
Yeah.
The mindset of a not cowardice, but instead of like courageous or courage, it's
Hmm.
you look at that edge of that seat and you're like, okay, this is the decision that I have to make. I have no idea where I'm going to land. I have no clue what's going to happen, and it could be terrible, it could be great, and they still make the decision to move forward.
Yeah.
So to me, when I look at my life,
Shit.
I'm a person that has decided to be courageous regardless of what happens. And
Hmm.
some other things obviously took me a little while to figure out that I really needed to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But my why, which is at a time I didn't really know what it was, for the
Hmm.
longest time I didn't even know what was driving me until I actually decided to sit down and write it down. Like for me, my why was so strong that again, I had no clue what it was,
Hmm.
that I chose to always be courageous and always say yes to opportunities like that felt like deep in my soul that were the right
Yeah.
decisions for me to make. From moving to Caracas and not staying in my hometown, to
Yeah.
going and being an exchange student in like fucking Indiana, like in the middle of like hillbilly
Fucking
country, like,
Indiana.
right?
Yeah.
Like, no offense, actually, Indiana has like the nicest people compared to Florida.
Hey,
Like
yeah, my
Florida,
best friend lives there. Shout
well,
out to you, Matt.
yeah, Florida people are like in general, like as people are gonna hate me for saying this, but they're dickheads, and
that's
like Indiana,
that's a new one.
in
Yeah.
they're super nice. But like
Yeah.
that's what made me make the decision to say I'm gonna go to the middle of like a cornfield in Indiana. I'm gonna and then like back again, like making the decision after I had that crash to say like, you know what, I'm gonna like pick up and go and move to the US, or I'm gonna go and pick up and go to the Houston, or I'm gonna go and pick up and go to Florida. I have no idea what's gonna happen, or like I'm gonna
Mhm.
do this, I'm gonna do that. So I never stopped. Like I never
Yeah.
once like say like no, I just I'm not afraid, because to me now when I look back, kind of connecting the dots backwards, is like I just feel like I was more afraid of regret that I was obviously
Yeah.
of kind of like facing opportunity and seeing what life kind of had in store for me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I feel like separated me out from, again, that people that typically have the mindset of comfort, and they just kind of like to stay in that bubble because
Mhm.
they just fear too much what they don't know.
Yeah.
That's the thing with fearless
I'm
is.
I mean that's the caveat, right? I mean, you either choose to live a life of just within this example, cowardice, where you know what you need to do, but you don't take that opportunity for whatever reason, or you live in your power and you choose to be courageous. And so, man, you said something that you and I have always resonated with is like your why. Andres, what is that? What is that for you?
So my why is, it's literally like, I kind of bring it back to one moment when I said to myself that I don't ever want to experience what I experienced, kind of like the uncertainty growing up.
Hmm.
I don't want the same thing for my family. And to me, that was reflected on finances and reflected on money. And not because money buys solutions, but because mine money gives me in a certain way the freedom of choice for many things
Yeah.
that I can do in my life. So to me, it's always been the drive to say like, I want to build a business. I want to have all these different things like that. So when I realized that I was like limited on what I could do, that's, for example, when I decided to go, instead of working for somebody, working for myself. Because as a dietitian, unfortunately, you have a ceiling on how much money you can make working for somebody, right? Or
100%.
working in
Yeah.
a hospital, or working for like, I mean, like like the highest like paying dietitian that working for like in an NFL teams, they're still like they're making now what our company kind of makes in, like, in a year, right?
Yep.
Which is like, again, at the top, like when they're freaking 50 years old,
That's
right?
the
So I was like,
top. Yeah.
yeah, that's the top. I was like, I don't want to be, that person that is like climbing up and then like working for somebody else's dream or working for somebody else's. So like my wise root is rooted on my wanting to kind of build a family that like has the freedom of choice, and that money doesn't become an issue, and more
Yeah.
deeper than that, to be able to kind of pass on to generations and leave a legacy that can stay.
Hmm.
That to me is kind of what drives me, what kind of gets me up in the morning, and it's the kind of things that I try to. And when I realized, like, when I was like, why was I so like driven to do all these things and to
Yeah.
do all that? And it's, when I look back, and I even haven't, kind of putting this out in words, is like, that's probably that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's why I was so fearless to do whatever it took for me to do that. And I even write it down. Like when I was, I think it was like 24 years old, that little life goals over there said by age 30, I will
Hmm.
have established and successful nutrition business. And by age 35, we'll be making $1 million every year,
Hmm.
at least. And I wrote that with purpose, with intention. When I was like literally sitting down in an apartment, in Orlando, like going to getting my master's, have no idea how to build a nutrition business, having no
Yeah.
idea how to do anything, and broke as fuck. Like I was struggling, right?
Yeah.
So I knew what I wanted, and I knew that, like, the reasoning behind all those things why I wanted that was just so strong that I was not gonna stop. And to this day, I haven't.
Yeah.
That's I think what that why was for me, and still is.
Man, that makes total sense too. I mean, we're kind of going across. I'm pretty sure I just found myself a title for this pod, but we'll get afterwards. Fearless. This theme keeps coming up, right? So you just did something that was pretty fucking fearless recently that you celebrated that took 10 plus years. I'm pretty sure, if I understand that correctly. So that's
Mhm.
you becoming an American citizen, correct?
Yeah. And I think that's not something I did, like, as in like I'm fearless, I'm gonna do it, because it wasn't really a choice that I could have made.
Yeah.
But becoming a U.S. citizen is well, first of all, it's a privilege, but it's definitely one that comes with a lot of like obstacles in order for you to be able to even get to become eligible to be one. And that
Yeah.
was obviously the kind of the biggest hurdles that I had to go through for the past 10 years of my life. Well, not the past 10
Yeah.
years, but for a long time. When we come
Yeah.
to this country, um, it's not easy, for somebody that wasn't born here or is not a resident here.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in college, I couldn't work because technically I'm supposed to be able to, like, pay my own stuff, right? That's like the
Yeah.
condition
Yeah.
that they gave me when they gave me my visa. Can you support yourself? Right? So that was one thing. And then, finding myself in a really tough situation economically, and it's like, hey, I having to go to like the international student office and saying like, what can I do? I can't, my parents can't continue to pay for me, and then give
Yeah.
me the opportunity to say, okay, we're going to give you a permission to work in our place. Now every time I switched to a company, I had to ask for permission, I had to submit paperwork. So imagine doing that for like literally 7 8 years of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it got to a point where I was given a choice. He was like, well, not given a choice. It's like, your visa permit is about to, excuse me, expire. So you either like find an employer that hires you with a visa, which no like position in dietetics would do that,
Mm-mm.
or you're gonna have to go home. And that was not a choice for me. I was like, I still have way too many things to do, and like home is an option. This is obviously when things in Venezuela started to get a little kind of nasty. It's like, no
Yeah.
way, I'm not doing that. So then I had to do what I had to do. So I had to like apply for a master's degree. I don't know how I made it happen, but I made it happen. I was driving like 2 hours just to go to class, not every day, like 3 days a week. Like it was like I was grinding and I was like nonstop and still working full time, working on Saturdays, like everything just so I could be able to do that. And
Yeah.
even so, after I graduated, I had 1 year to figure it out what was I gonna do next in terms of that. And it was like, I was not a citizen. I was still an exchange student. I
Sure.
established a company not knowing if that was a legal thing to do, right? Somebody
Yeah.
just told me, and
Yeah.
lawyers was like, hey, as long as you pay your taxes, they shouldn't really kind of be putting a spotlight. And, like, well, I did it. Like, you can come after me now, but hey, I'm a US citizen now, so they can do
Yeah.
whatever they want.
So what's
But
good?
yeah, but I did things that I needed to do back then just to make sure that I was able to kind of stay here. So yeah, I was privileged enough to now 2 weeks ago become a U.S. citizen, which is obviously kind of like the not the end of a chapter, but it's more like like the final end goal of like a 12-year journey where
Yeah.
like I saw myself being here and then calling this home, right? But I was kind of like faced with a lot of hurdles in order for that to be the case, and that's why they make such a big deal out of that event, because it's not easy, and it's
Yeah.
expensive, and it's like tedious, and it's like, yeah, you either do this or you're gonna have to deport, you're gonna have to like send you home and whatnot. So there's
Hmm.
millions of people that go through that every day right now.
Yeah. I mean, we mentioned this on your pod. Seeing, and we'll make sure that we put this in the show notes just so that you could see the image, because it's such a fruitful image of you and your get up, got some American flags in your hand, and the type of joy that I just saw. It's like that childhood joy that you're just like, oh my God, like I just want to smile with the person. Now, you and I talked about this, and you had said, man, the outcry and the support has been so phenomenal. And you had mentioned too, like, dude, I shed some tears, right? And I kind of want to ask you, like, what part of that journey? I mean, you sort of went on it, like you talked about how tedious it was and what you had to do to try to figure it out, driving 2 hours to school and whatnot. Like, what were the tear breaking moments for you during that process?
I think like almost I guess like the best way to describe it is like, still trying to be courageous to wanting to do things but not being able to do them because there were other things outside of my control that I couldn't really kind of
Yeah.
like control myself. But I also found myself actually in a very like tough period of my time of my life, and when I was like 2015 or so, when I was just that negative Nancy. I was just like that victim mentality, like everything is happening to me and I can't
Hmm.
believe this is happening. This is obviously like I was just living a very scarcity mindset. That's another big kind of like,
Yeah.
and I realized that most of my life I've been in that kind of position, right? To me,
Yeah.
like, spending money and all those different things like that were so difficult for me. And I also lived, no matter how much I wanted to accomplish certain things, I still lived in that scarcity mindset. Like things are gonna run away. And
Yeah.
for 2015, like I blame everything that happened to me on that. It's like I'm not a resident. Like I can't like my visa is about to expire. All those different things, and I would tell that to everybody to a point that people
Hmm.
would just like try to like avoid me because like, oh, this guy's holding is gonna talk about is like all his struggles that
His
he's kind of going
visa.
through.
Yeah.
And I when I look back, I was like, man, why was I like that? But obviously, like the tears came from the perspective of the fact that I overcame those things. Right, like I learned to become a different person, to progress. I actually struggled with a lot of anxiety growing up. Like it was undiagnosed, but I know for a fact that this is something that I it was really difficult for me. To times where I would, scream in the middle of like an empty room just for myself and just kind of like trying to like figure it out how to do life and all that. So I, those tears were just simply a result of like, finally, like
Hmm.
everything I worked so hard for, everything I try to do, everything of who I am now, it's been here. And this is obviously a proof that I can finally just say, like, this is home, this is where it all happened.
Yeah.
So it just reminded me of all what I've gone through to kind of get to this point. And that's why it
Yeah.
was an emotional moment for me.
And again, man, it was just so great to be able to see and see the joy. you know, again, having met you later in life and just seeing the type of fortitude that you put into everything that you do is just, it was just really cool to see. And for listeners out there, obviously, you know that by now, like this podcast is about people's heroes journeys and it's about the habits. And so you talked about Andres 2015 you and living in a lot of scarcity, and you talked about how you had to like claw yourself out of that, right? So stemming to where you're at now in 2021, which habits or mindset things are things that you cannot live without, and why?
So I think the biggest kind of change that happened to me when I realized that I needed to start living, I needed to start to live differently, is I started seeing what successful people did. Um, so I said, you know what, if I
Success
want
leaves
to,
clues.
yeah. So like I want to start learning to see what is it that like these people were doing. So I remember at the time I was reading books by, you know, Tony Robbins and listening podcasts by Tim Ferriss, and I started in that kind
Hmm.
of thing. And this is where, for example, I discovered the whole thing called morning routine. So I realized like, hey, you know what, like if I start the day correctly, then I'm going to kind of have better days moving forward. um so I started that. I started waking up earlier. I started to just win the mornings. I One of my mentors, like, you know, he's just a really good friend, but I would have conversations with him all the time. He's actually the mental conditioning coach for the Tampa Bay Rays and for the, I think, the Cleveland Browns. His name is Justin Sua.
Tug Justin Sua. I was about to say
Yeah, yeah,
that.
Justin Sua. He actually, he and I started both in IMG, and he had done a lot of things by the time that he got a position there as a director of mental conditioning. But I would just go to sit in his office, and he taught me so much. And a lot, one of the things that he always kind of like, you know, taught me was like the whole idea behind resilience and behind like routines and habits. And one thing he taught me was this whole concept about the keystone habit. And he said, like, hey, if you start
Hmm.
focusing on one area of your life and you give it all the energy to try to make it better, what this keystone habit philosophy teaches is that, you know, everything else in your life typically kind of gets better. And a
Yeah.
keystone habit is like, you know, they also think about it kind of like a like an arch, right? And it's like that keystone, like that specific piece that without that
Yeah.
piece, the whole thing kind of crumbles, right? So when you focus so much on that specific piece, your entire like life, like arch, typically just kind of like makes sense. So that's exactly
Hmm.
what I did. So I started focusing a lot on, I think at the time it was just more my health and my fitness. I was like, I'm gonna work out. I'm gonna start doing all these different things like that, and that kind of started to make me feel like, okay, like I want to eat better. I want to just like, you know, wake up earlier. I want to be able to do these
Yeah.
things. I want to have more energy and all that kind of stuff like that. And slowly that started becoming my keystone habit. So some of the habits that really I can't live without now is that, you know, when I don't wake up like this morning, for example, because I did wrong things at night, which means like maybe I stayed up late or I was watching
Hmm.
something, whatever, then I don't start my day the same way that I would if I don't wake up earlier and do all the things that is going to help me. So throughout that path, I discovered things like meditation that has helped me manage my stress and my anxiety better. And it's interesting
Hmm.
because meditation is not a practice that I have implemented, and I realized like you just magically kind of changed me. It's like after doing it
Yeah.
so long, you start to realize how you react to life in a different way. That, you know, and
100%.
people start to notice like, wow, like, or GV, obviously my people that are so close to me, they're like, you know, you reacted to that a lot different, you know, that than other times where you would just completely like freaked out for days, right?
Yeah.
So those are things that have helped me maintain my calmness to kind of
Hmm.
navigate entrepreneurship, which is like the biggest kind of like, you know, emotional roller coaster that anybody can go through, especially somebody not knowing or never have done it, haven't done it ever in their lives. So
Hmm.
that's what I think it kind of keeps me centered. And when
Yeah.
I try to like, when I deviate a little bit more from that center, I try to bring it myself to like, you know, like I also journal a lot. So I write my thoughts, I write my things, I write like what's kind of happening. Gratitude is a big thing for me now that it's
Yeah.
also so ingrained, and I try to reflect on that. Like, what am I grateful for today? Like, I actually wake up this morning, you know, like there's people that don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
So those are big ones for me that I feel like are have helped me shape like my day, my weeks, my months, my years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we kind of go back to Justin Sua. I mean, shout out to him. Definitely need to have him on. You know, he started my mental conditioning journey too, seeing what he posts and everything that he posts inside of his podcast. And one of the things on that, I mean, it's a huge reason why it's why it's the name of the podcast. I can't believe I made it because I try to do a lot of work based off of what it feels like for me to make it and what my life looks like, and then reverse engineering back. So I want to ask you the same question. Obviously, it's the theme of the podcast, right? So, do you feel like you have made it? And if not, what does making it look like for you?
That's a good question. Um, I don't think I've made it. Um, but I also don't think I haven't really made it. I don't know if that makes sense. So
Hmm.
like I
Yeah,
I
yeah.
honestly feel like I'm in a position when I look back, like again something else that this mentor Will kind of told me at some point is like, like life is just a journey where you're trying to climb up to a specific point, but your perception typically changes throughout that process. So it's different from a person that if you're starting climbing Mount Everest, right, your
Hmm.
perception from the bottom looking up is completely different than your perception halfway through it looking down,
Yeah,
right? So I think to answer your question is like, have I made it? Well, from the perception where I'm at right now and looking back, sure, I have made it. I have made such
yeah,
a long stride. But when I look in the other way and I look at to see obviously where the top is, I still haven't. Right.
yeah,
And the question also it's kind of becoming like, so when will I know that I'm actually at the top? I will know I'm at the top when I feel like I can actually, like, it's not like I'm not enjoying my life, but I can actually feel that I get so excited about living my life, like, I'm literally kind of like accomplishing all these things that are kind of either part of my bucket list or the things that just
hmm,
I feel that are going to kind of bring me fulfillment, like raising a family, like having that financial freedom to say like, you know what, like I'm gonna take 2 months off and I'm just gonna go and
yeah,
we're just gonna go with the family and we're gonna go to freaking China or like, like
yeah,
Thailand and just kind of like travel through islands and just do whatever we want. That's a point in my life when I'll say like I made it, right? Like
yeah,
where I'm giving opportunities to people to make money, meaning like, employers or people that can just like kind of benefit for what we're doing, and also that we're creating impact in people's
yeah,
lives, right? That we can kind of help and serve them. I think we were put in this world because we, especially entrepreneurs, are the people that can kind of help serve more and more people in their lifetimes. That's
yeah,
really what we're kind of like, why we're like, that's kind of like the why of a person that is kind of building something from the ground up.
yeah,
So from my perspective right now, I've made it, but not to the fullest extent of what I still need to go through to be able to kind
yeah.
of get to that top.
I like that visualization of seeing yourself sort of climb that Everest and then looking down compared, like, yeah, hell yeah. But then looking up, like, I still have some areas to continue to work at, man. So, dude, holy shit. I'm just so happy. One, to hear this story pretty much all the way through. And then two, I'm even more so happy to continue to share our friendship and to see where you go, man. So I appreciate you taking time. I want to hit you with two more questions before I'm done with you. I know you got a busy ass day. All right. Andres is a
Go ahead.
very busy man, everyone. This this is a big deal. He's out here. Okay. All right. So put your mind space. All right. It's a hero's journey. It's a podcast about the hero's journey. Put yourself in the mind space of a hero. I mean, you just actually gave this to me a couple of months ago. I didn't know that you were a huge Marvel person. Uh, but all right, put yourself in the mind of a superhero. Who is your superhero comparison and why?
Um, I would say, wow, that's a really good question because I'm like going directly into like Marvel. We just watched Black Widow this weekend and it's phenomenal.
Ooh, I need to watch.
Yeah. I'm going through kind of like down the list of all my superheroes and kind of like thinking who I think I would choose. I think I would choose a hybrid superhero. I
Okay.
think I like mixing Iron Man and Captain America. And the reason why
Ooh,
I would
okay.
mix them up is because Iron Man, what I like about Tony Stark was a person that had vision and that he was again fearless. I didn't care what anybody thought. Like he was just like, I'm gonna do this and I'm going to make it happen, even though people don't
Yeah.
think it's possible. So that's one. But I don't like the fact about Tony Stark being somebody that was so selfless, right? That's a part of it too. That what I would say, like I will
Hmm.
not take like the entire like persona of like Tony Stark and Iron
Yeah.
Man.
Of Tony Stark.
But
Yeah.
obviously that's where like Captain America comes in, and it's being a noble person, being a person that is humble, that
Yeah.
cares more about others than he cares about himself, and like he
Hmm.
would try to put others and serve others in the ways that like sometimes even again like not always putting himself first. So I
Yeah.
think if you combine those two personalities, that's exactly the kind of superhero that I want to be.
Oh, I like that enmeshment too, because you're absolutely right. One is really selfish, and the other one is completely selfless. Damn, I like that. I really like that comparison. All right, Andres, where can our listeners follow you? Where can they support you? What projects do you have going on currently or coming up that you're extremely passionate about that we can all, as a community, support you with?
A few places. If you want to listen, you can check out our podcast, which you Desi are part of that once a month on our chit chat series. Our podcast is
Whoop,
called the
whoop.
Nutrition Blueprint Podcast, available on all platforms. Um, the second best place for you to reach out to you for us is like Instagram, and if you want a little bit more tighter community and connection, we have a private Facebook community called Planners Nutrition Club, which is actually changing names pretty soon. But that's going to be a place where we typically do lives and we do a lot more community engagement. So you get a little bit more like first-hand experience into what we do, still for free. And things in the pipeline, we are right now undergoing and actually a program that we call the Nutrition Makeover Method, which is a process to kind of help you change your lifestyle and build a blueprint for so you can obviously not
So
get to your
dope.
goals, but also you also kind of like get um, to be able to sustain that. I tell people I don't care too much about you achieving your goals, but you'll be able to sustain those goals in the long term.
Hmm.
So that's kind of like what we kind of got going on right now. And of course, if you want to learn more about that, you can reach out to us in any of the previous channels that I just kind of shared.
Yeah, 100%. We'll make sure we put all of his information in the show notes. Having being one of his good friends, man, you got to follow this guy. You got to see his journey because it's uplifting and it's superhero type shit. So, Andres, my man, I love you, bro. Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much
much
for
for
having me.
taking some time to tell us the story, man. Go hug your beautiful wife for me, man. I love you.
Thank you.
Peace out,
Appreciate it,
everyone.
brother.